tonight accusations of a humanitarian crisis at Rikers Island.
What do we want? Now!
According to elected officials and lawyers who witnessed what they describe as catastrophic conditions in one of the country's most notorious jail complexes.
It's one of the most dreadful places I've ever been.
Did you feel like a human being in there?
No. Once you go through that door, you are an animal. They treat you like an animal.
Reports of people packed into cells without toilets, standing in feces, no regular access to food and medical care.
Did you witness violence?
Yes.
Did you witness riots?
Yes.
NBC News spoke to this man on the day he was released from Rikers. He asked to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation.
I was scared because if someone got to put a sheet around their neck, try to hang it up in a cell to get attention from an officer.
You saw a fellow inmate try to hang himself.
Yes.
Thomas Tomas Carlo, Javier Velasco.
11 people have died in custody this year, almost half by suicide. Conditions drawing outrage from New York politicians, like New York Assemblyperson Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who was among a group of officials who recently visited the jail.
We saw dozens of people in cells, laying on the floor, without access to clean bathrooms, clean running water, food, and most traumatically, I witnessed an attempted suicide. Rikers Island is a death sentence.
Part of the problem, an historic staffing shortage. According to a recent lawsuit from the city of New York against the Court Officers Benevolent Association, officer absences have increased a staggering 215% this year compared to 2019. The city has since pulled the suit, but a spokesperson for the Department of Corrections says about a third of officers are unable to work with people in custody each day.
What it means is that there's no one to actually run the jails.
Public Defender Alice Fontier helped organize the tour for elected officials.
People have to get off the island. There's no other immediate fix. More people are going to die.
In a statement to NBC News, the Department of Corrections saying in part, quote, the conditions described by elected officials have improved dramatically. Conditions like overcrowding and unacceptable waits were ameliorated. We still have a ways to go when it comes to fixing our overall staffing shortage, but we are seeing a steady flow of officers returning to work. But just on Friday, the Union for Jail Officers sounding the alarm.
We have been dealing with an unprecedented staffing crisis, forcing hundreds of officers to work 25 hours or more without meals and rest.
Meanwhile, the prison population once again swelling. Lawyers say the majority of those incarcerated simply could not afford bail.
I want to tell you about one person that I saw and what they were doing to him. They had brought this man to the unit, but I guess it was full. So they locked him inside a shower. Nobody could come up with $250 in his family to pay that amount of bail to get him out.
New York City has a plan to close Rikers, but the jail won't shut its doors until 2026. Advocates say reform needs to happen now. But for many people experiencing the crisis firsthand,
It's terrible. It's terrible. I wouldn't wish it on nobody.
All right, Dasha Burns joins us now. Dasha, a lot of people who may be watching this may be surprised about the actual prison population at Rikers right now, and you've learned something from your legal sources?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. This is an important point that often gets overlooked. The vast majority of the population on Rikers Island, they are pre-trial, which means they have not been convicted of a crime. They are sitting there awaiting their day in court, many of them just because they could not afford bail. And the courts are backed up because of the pandemic, so that is taking even longer than it normally would. And we have lawyers saying that they have clients who have posted bail, but those releases are also getting delayed because of the shortage of officers, Tom.
Dasha Burns tonight shining a light on those horrific conditions there at Rikers. Dasha, thank you for that.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. We have a guest here today that spent some time in prison. Victor Tate normally brings these young people to us, not young, middle age. But we have today with us Mark Sherrington. And he spent 29 years in prison, and he's going to tell us how he got through it all. That's a trauma, and we see a couple a couple of people, they talked about Rikers Island, which everybody has heard about the death sentence you receive just going there. So tell us, Mark, your experience at Rikers and what you're doing now.
Wow. Thank you first for having me. And this is an honor and a privilege. It's something I never imagined doing. I'm just grateful to be here. I was arrested in 1986 at the age of 20. I spent about 2 years on Rikers Island.
Oh, 2 years.
Before I was convicted and sentenced to prison. Yeah, 2 years.
Was it that bad back then?
I don't see any difference from then to now, except maybe that the population has increased.
So they treated you like an animal?
Basically, yes. I would say that I was maybe somewhat fortunate. Some of the old timers, the staff that worked there, I guess took a liking to me. I got a little job, so you know I was able to spend my time maybe just slightly a little differently, you know, than most folks. But I was still subject to the same conditions. You know.
What do you mean you had different?
Say again?
You served it a little different than other folks?
Yeah, well, I had something to occupy my time, in other words, you know.
This is at Rikers?
At Rikers Island, right.
Well, what did you do different than others?
Well, for one, I worked cleaning up the officers' locker rooms, right?
Well, you made brownie points.
Say again?
You had brownie points.
Well, one officer swore up and down he knew my father, and he looked at me. You know, I guess older people have this sense of like recognition. He looked at me and said, "You're so-and-so's son. You're gonna come work for me."
Oh, wow.
So
you
I was
were
like,
lucky.
okay,
That's lucky.
Thanks, Pops. Another job that I had was what they call a suicide prevention aide. So when the gentleman described witnessing people attempt to take their lives, I had that experience as well.
And tell them the charge and how you got into all this.
Okay.
You lack anger management.
Yes, at the time I most certainly did.
At 20, we all
at age 20, right? I most certainly did. Lacked the wherewithal to, I would say, redirect my energy. So when I found out my girlfriend at the time had been sexually assaulted, I was enraged and I sought revenge and took it. That resulted in me being convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in state prison. I'd served a little over 29 years, approximately 30 years in prison. After completing my actual sentence, the rest of the time was because I had been repeatedly denied parole, despite the fact that I met or exceeded any requirements or expectations of the court or the prison system. I had done everything to prepare myself for release. I would say with the exception of walking on water, and I was working pretty hard on that.
Well, you do anything to get out, you know? And why would you
well,
deny you
I
parole?
did my time. I would say I did my time righteously. I did it with integrity, and I stayed focused.
Well, what kept you in there? Why did they refuse you parole?
Okay, well, at the time, the parole board, pretty much as it is now, the state parole board was staffed with folks with primarily law enforcement or prosecutorial backgrounds, so that instead of performing their actual function, which is one of evaluation, they, I guess perhaps by their training or experience, you know, were focused on the crime itself. You committed a crime, you hurt someone, you killed someone, as if it was their authority to overrule the judge and inflict more punishment than the judge thought necessary.
You killed the cop.
Say again?
They treated you like you killed the cop.
In fact, one parole commissioner actually said, because of what I was guilty of, that he thought that it meant exactly that. Well, you would kill a cop, wouldn't you? And I was flabbergasted. I stopped him. I said, "Excuse me, do you have my file? Because I'm not here for that. Like, I thought he had mixed me up with someone else.
Was the guy, did the guy that you killed, did he have a father that was, did he have policemen behind him?
No, to the best of my knowledge, I learned this later on from the prosecutor and the police that he wasn't just what he thought. He thought of himself as like the neighborhood tough guy.
Yeah.
But they informed me that they knew him well and that he was known to carry a gun, which was pretty much what I heard, which has resulted in his demise.
You shot him first?
Yes, sir.
So why would he rape your fiancée?
No, he did not rape. He assaulted her. He molested her.
Oh, okay. Do you still see her now?
Unfortunately, during my incarceration, she passed away.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Hmm. You had a tough... Well, how did you deal with your guilt?
I don't know whether I read or heard it, but somewhere I picked up and zoomed in on this phrase that an apology is meaningless without a gesture. And I said, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I had determined to, during and after, like from that point on, to live my life that way, to act as if I actually care about other people and to do things to help other people. For example, all those times I was denied parole, of course, I was mad, sad, and a few other things. But instead of being consumed by that, you know, I would turn around and help other folks. Like, so every time I was denied, I set a whole bunch of other people free. Because I had to learn the law to understand what was happening to myself.
Okay.
It became a skill. And as the time progressed, some say I turned it into an art. So every time they shot me down, about 10 people walked out the door, like legally through the courts, you know, with my assistance.
Oh, wow. That seemed like that would have got you a parole, too.
I don't think they liked it too much, but I'm basically cutting in on their hustle, so to speak, which is, you know, incarceration is big business.
Right.
Right. In fact, the money that is spent on incarcerating folks, I would say from my experience, like they say right now, it's like $70,000 to incarcerate someone for a year. I didn't receive $70,000 worth of anything. So I hope nobody's mad at me as taxpayers. I didn't get that. It didn't come to me. I don't know what they spent it on, right? But it wasn't me or any of my peers. Yeah, like I said, I turned, you know, by that, you know, as time progressed, we were talking about redirecting my energy and managing my anger and such like that. Instead, I would say, wait a minute, listen, you, and y'all over there pack your stuff. I'm sending you home. And some of my peers used to joke with me and say, man, you live in the law library. Why don't you come up out of there and hang out with us in the yard sometimes? And I was like, no, I got stuff to do. You know, I think that perhaps, if you recall, and I'm sure you may, Thurgood Marshall, as a lawyer, he was vicious. How did they stop him? They turned him into a judge. They took him out of circulation.
Right.
So I was thinking, you know, what happened with me was ultimately I had to litigate myself out of prison, right? And I think that, you know, I did so. Judge threw out the last parole denial, told him to give me another hearing. I think at that point they kind of, you know, put two and two together and probably said, well, every time we shoot this one guy down, a bunch of people walk out the door. Maybe if we just let him go, it'll stem the flow a little bit. So, you know, like I looked at it like, you know, yeah, jokingly I was thinking, well, maybe they kind of took me out of circulation like they did Brother Thurgood, you know.
That's a good theme. You have any questions for him? What do you think about that?
Well, I would say technically I still am, right?
Well, he's 21. So
okay,
he's
I was his age when I was incarcerated, right?
Yeah. I mean, kind of just absorbing what you're saying at this point. I think I think it is pretty interesting how how flexible the law can be used for, because it can be used as a tool for justice and injustice. And I actually want to ask you, how did you learn how to read those texts? How did you learn how to break the language down?
While I was on Rikers Island, I ran across this one old timer. This is where it started. This one old timer, he looked at me and he had this concerned look, and it wasn't like we were really cool. I had never met him before.
Yeah.
You know, I met him there, right? And he looked at me and he said, "Excuse me, young blood, I don't mean to get in your business, but what they got you in here for?" And I told him. He said, "You need to get your behind in that law library and find out what these people are trying to do to you."
Yeah, yeah.
I remember going to the commissary and buying, among other things, a yellow legal pad and a couple of pens. And that was the first time I set foot in there. Now, I could read, but...
it's hard to read the text.
Yeah, that is a little different.
It's a different way to read.
I basically self-taught myself to read that. And what you just pointed out, right, about the plain English, everyday language versus legalese, right? That I had a stark example of that. I'm in the court one day, and my lawyer came and said something about waive something. So, you know, I absentmindedly looked around the courtroom. I didn't see no hands in there. I was like, this dude crazy. What are you talking about? Right? But lo and behold, what I found out was the waive he was talking about, meant that he waived some of my rights.
Yeah.
He gave away something that belonged to me, something that I was entitled to, some protection that could have helped me.
Yeah. So was he appointed by the state?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I haven't any experience in the criminal system, but what I have experienced with the law so far is working in real estate. So I've been doing real estate for like 3 years in Atlanta, and just seeing how these lawyers and how even these like business leaders use basic public records and like basic legalese to snatch land and snatch resources from these older people. I mean, it's so toxic.
It happens in every town.
It happens in every town. I've been trying to get this property right now for my great grandmother, and just seeing like how these people are so predatory, and thank God for the knowledge that I gained similar to you, so that we can defend against people who are doing bad business, because there's nothing wrong with business, and there's nothing wrong with the criminal justice. It's when people are using that thing to make money and be predatory, that's what makes everything corrupt.
Well, that's the real estate business.
But you know, I mean, I don't think so. I think you can do it in a moral way, but I think that the way that we're interacting with law and money, it's just nasty, right? It's almost like they're finessing people of their freedoms. Yeah.
Well, you look at Donald Trump, how he used the law.
Yeah.
To destroy democracy.
And it's legal, and it's the thing. It's like what you went through. It's like they could be like, well, that was perfectly legal what we did to you, and that's the problem.
I remember being in the prison yard upstate one day and just had this moment of clarity, you know, with this one thought. I looked around and I said, wait a minute, how is it possible that I know everybody here? And if I don't know them personally, like, we understand each other. We speak the same language. Like, we can relate. And come to find out, you know, with the guidance and mentorship of some of these, you know, older men that I met who steered me in the right direction, me and my cohorts and I, you know, I began to get this sense of like, wait a minute, this is by design. You know, I began to understand the politics of the situation, and the New York Times reported on this this study that these gentlemen did. They called it the 7 Neighborhood Study, right? But it is actually called the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice. And what they identified was that there are certain neighborhoods within New York City where all of the prisoners come from. Not all, excuse me, about 75%.
Yeah.
We're talking South Bronx, South Jamaica, Bed-Stuy, and a few other places throughout New York City. Well, and I said, oh, this is why I know all of it. I began to understand this is by design.
And where are you from?
I was born and raised, and my crime happened in South Jamaica.
Ah, okay. Well, that used to be a nice neighborhood.
Well, yeah, when my folks migrated, another historical note, I don't know if you know this, I'm pretty sure you do, back in the 50s, there was a huge migration of folks, black folks from Brooklyn to Queens.
Yeah.
And my folks were in that first batch of those, I
Yeah.
call them pioneers.
Yeah.
And at that time, Jamaica was an all-white neighborhood,
Yeah.
right? I think if they were not the first, I believe my family was the second black family to settle in South Jamaica, what is now South Jamaica. It was just Jamaica at the time. They moved from Bed-Stuy, which they told me was like the Huxtables, you know, at the time in the 50s. It was really nice.
That's right.
And they moved out there, and then came me.
Yeah.
I mean, like what's really powerful, what you're adding, or what you're saying in the conversation is just like, I know everyone that's here, it's by design. You're talking about like the sociological argument, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, please, sir. Yeah, I mean, you know,
exactly. Well, after the initial non-traditional approach study was issued, they did, it was updated and revised, and along with a few other of my peers, I was able to be involved in that. There was a group of us. We were under the mentorship of a brother you may know well, you may have heard of, Eddie Ellis.
Eddie Ellis.
Yeah, he passed away some time ago. Him and Larry White, better known as Lukeman, they had formed a group of young folks, including myself, that was known as the Resurrection Study Group. Right, and just like those three brothers that were childhood friends and became doctors in New Jersey, like this was our mission. We would uphold and support each and make sure that each other stayed focused and on track, preparing for our eventual release.
So when you re-entered society, how did you make a living?
Well, initially, prior to my current work, first it took me a minute to get a job. And I'm going to give you a for instance. This is something that a lot of people coming home face. Basically, it's discrimination based on your background.
Yeah.
Of course.
I recall distinctly one interview. I went down there, suited and booted, and filled out the application. And the guy said he would interview me right on the spot. And right in the middle of the interview, he stops, looks me dead in the face, and says, "How long were you upstate?" Stop the interview right there.
How did he find out?
Well, they ask you on the application at the time, it said, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And I said, yes, we'll discuss, right? But I didn't say, it doesn't say whether you were upstate or not, but he stopped. I don't know what he caught from me, or my demeanor, you know, it wasn't my dress, right? But he said, how long were you upstate? And the reason he said he had this sense of that, because at the time I was on Rikers Island, he was a correction officer there. We didn't know each other, but something, I had this feeling. I'm sitting there looking at him like, is this guy a cop or something? Like, why? He has this certain, you know, he's giving me this vibe. But when he told me this, then I understood, right? Needless to say, I didn't get the job. But if you've ever seen him, the job that I did get and held for a couple of years was pretty much similar to Cassius Green in Sorry to Bother You.
The call center?
Yes, right. Except it was, for me, it was corporate and financial communication. Like I would call you and update or inform you about whatever investments you had. We weren't selling anything, right? And minus the drugs and the science fiction stuff, right? You know, I was on a similar trajectory. I started at the bottom, you know, and they liked the way I talked and the way I handled, you know, the folks, and they promoted me, and I held that job until my current position with the RAP campaign, the Release Aging People in Prison campaign.
Tell us about the RAP campaign.
Okay.
Similar to what Victor does?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Victor and I share the same office space.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. The RAP campaign was started by 3 formerly incarcerated people, most notably Brother Mujahid Fareed, who passed away in about 2016 or 17, shortly after I was released in August of 2015. And initially, rap was focused on changing the regulations and the process of the parole board, as well as having fresh blood, new people with backgrounds, let's say like social work, clergy, medicine, anything other than law enforcement or prosecution that had to deal with folks who could actually appreciate people as people and understand human nature and the fact that people do grow, develop, and change over a period of time so that they could actually perform their evaluative function, as parole commissioners. And they succeeded in having the regulations changed and having new people seated on the parole board. And then RAP began to focus on changing the laws surrounding the whole parole process. And we currently have 2 bills pending before the state legislature. One is the Elder Parole Act that would give people aged 55 or older who are incarcerated, who have been so for 15 or more years, give them an opportunity to be considered for parole release, not an automatic release. And I'll give you an example of whom that may apply to. I left some good people behind, such as Johannes Johnson. We affectionately call him Knowledge. An older brother who always had a smile on his face, was a perfect gentleman. It was cool under fire. I mean, imagine, we're in the most toxic environment imaginable. And he was just as smooth and polite. And I thought, he must be going home soon. So I said, hey, when you getting out?
Never.
And he looked me dead in the face and said,
Never.
I ain't going home no time soon. I'm doing 75 to life. My face hit the floor. And I'm like, but how could you be
so cool?
So he said, what else am I going to do? Another gentleman, Stanley Bellamy, young brother like myself when we entered the system around the same time.
How old is
Knowledge is at least 70 right about now.
70? He told you this at 70?
No, he told me this in the 90s.
Oh,
he was like 50.
He was older than me then, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I was maybe in my 30s or so. I'm not even sure right now, but when he told me, I was shocked. To see, and I was like, man, like, he must have like nerves of steel or something like.
I know, yeah.
And I was like, I felt almost embarrassed, to have, relatively speaking, the little bit of time that I had compared to his. And he was another one of my mentors, that coached and guided me to, become the mature, rational, thinking adult that I am today. Another one of my peers, Stanley Bellamy, we entered the system around the same time. He is still incarcerated on a sentence of 62.5 years to life. The way New York's sentencing laws work, those are what you call, just like mine, the 15 in life. The first part is the punishment, but that's how much time you have to serve before you can even be considered for parole. So in these...
You spend the full 15 before you even went up for
Absolutely.
parole?
There's no such thing as early release in the state of New York.
So
no one gets out early. You have to do the 15, just like Jamel or Stanley has to do the 62.5 years before they will even think about releasing him. And Knowledge has to do the 75 years before they will consider releasing him.
Do you think that should be abolished?
And this is the point of the Elder Parole Act. So that people like them who are serving these long and life and virtual life sentences, or what we have come to know as death by incarceration sentences, right? That they will get an opportunity.
Was he in for murder?
Say again?
Was he in for murder?
Both. They both were.
Oh, okay.
Needless to say, I was surrounded by some very serious people throughout my experience.
Well, you were
and I was one of them.
Can I ask you a question? So with the elder, say the law again, I just want to make sure I get it right.
Elder Parole, the Elder Parole Act.
So with the Elder Parole Act, would you be comfortable, or do you think the state would be comfortable with kind of like just having a general parole act, if someone's been there for 5 or 6 years, that they can be able to be eligible, like, for at least, I mean, because I think from what I'm hearing about people who are in prison, like my cousin was falsely imprisoned.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a horrific experience. You know, maybe 10 to 15 or 30 years might be too long of a time to think if someone should be able to be heard for parole.
Well, firstly, in reverse, I would agree, because I thought to myself, well, it didn't take 15 years for me, like mentally, emotionally, et cetera, to
1 month seems kind
of right. The first 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Y'all can crack the gate now. You know, like But I agree.
What prison
it
were
should.
you in?
Say again.
What prison were you in?
I was in several. I spent the majority of time behind these 40-foot walls in maximum security prisons throughout New York State. Greenhaven.
Attica?
Never Attica. I was at Greenhaven. I started at Clinton, then Greenhaven, and then after a period of time, they reduced my security classification from maximum security to medium, and then sent me to Fishkill and Otisville.
Man, I think like what you're showing is so powerful because you're expanding people's imagination about parole, right? Because people are like, well, if they did a nonviolent offense, then of course they should be heard. But for someone to think about an individual who is rational, mature, and very, intelligent, and to hear that you committed a second-degree murder, right? I think it just shows people that it allows people to empathize more with you and people in your predicament, so that we can have the parole conversation be expanded a little bit broader to the American imagination,
Okay, well, here's, I think, something that is key to, most germane to your point. Prison officials have known for decades that folks serving those long sentences for the serious crimes, if you're serving a long sentence, you can pretty much probably imagine this person did a serious crime, right?
Yeah.
Folks incarcerated for serious crimes, and particularly people incarcerated for violent crimes, have the lowest recidivism rate. These are the folks least likely to commit another crime after release. Yet, in New York, they are the least likely to be paroled.
But can I ask you a question? Is that because they spent that long amount of time, that they're so reformed, that they're not going to commit the same crime again, do you think?
No, and I will tell you why. Well, I would say, first of all, for me, the thought of changing my heart and mind and staying focused started before I even went upstate. Started on Rikers Island.
Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't alone. Like the brother I just mentioned, Stanley Bellamy, and a few others. We met each other in that most toxic environment imaginable, right? We were all in the same frame of mind, right? And it didn't start because we matured, right? We determined to make sure that we did, that we are not, first of all, that we not only survived, but that we would be ready to hit the ground running like CeeLo dice, in a positive way, when we were released. I definitely wouldn't be, I get the premise of your question though, because that sounds like, okay, well then let's lock them up for some decades. But what happens is, as I witnessed, like, I met old timers when I got there, right? And over time, like myself and my peers, we began to age and grow into our maturity, and all of those old timers gradually began to disappear. And not because they were being released. The majority of them died in prison. and we began to replace them. There's an endless cycle of aging, sickness, and death in New York State prisons. And RAP is determined to end that. My agency, the Release Aging People in Prison campaign, we are determined to end that. Our other bill is the Fair and Timely Parole Act that basically levels the playing field for, can't do it, pardon me, this is the bad time, the worst time. So that levels the playing field so that folks like myself aren't judged and rejudged and punished exclusively because we committed a crime or we committed a violent crime, right? As if the parole board gets to overrule the judge. They have to consider the whole person, right? How you spent your time. What are your release plans? Did you make preparations for where you're going to live or where you're going to work or are you going to go to school? In addition to the crime itself, to see an individual holistically. So we're trying to basically do away with the whole racist notion, that first of all, because you committed a crime, then you became one. That doesn't seem to apply to everyone, right? As I said, I began to understand it seems like only certain people are going to jail. Even in there, even in the parole process, for example, when it's time to get out, the same dynamic kicks in. And I'll give you an example. The last time I was denied parole, for the 9th time, another gentleman went to the parole board with me. It wasn't just, we saw the same parole commissioners on the same day. We had the same type of case. I think I may have done a little more time than him as of that moment. He was released and I wasn't. The difference was he was Caucasian. And to rub salt in the wound, he was incarcerated for a triple homicide.
Triple homicide?
A triple homicide. And they said, oh, you're okay, you can go home. The New York Times has reported on this.
Do you know somebody on the board?
Well, I don't know. I thought, and you could probably help me, because I know there's a third part of this equation. He had the complexion for the connection, and he got the protection.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
No.
Okay, cool. So old timers taught me well.
Did you, so with your experience and you looking at the notion that people are not the worst thing that they've done.
Exactly.
And I know this is a really hard question to ask, and I just want to ask you, because I think for people in the audience or people to watch, to think about like empathy more. For the gentleman that sexually assaulted the woman you loved, do you regret killing him?
Absolutely. I regretted it the moment it happened.
Oh, yeah.
And in the instant, I kept thinking to myself, don't make me do this.
What do you think should have, if you could do it again, what do you think you would have done?
At this point, I would first make sure she was okay. If need be, I would have directed her to, get the cops involved, get herself checked out in terms of some counseling, some therapy or something like that. Yeah, of course, I would be mad, sad, and, all of the above, but I wouldn't act on that. I would, again, redirect that energy towards, more of a healing, solution.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to update ourselves and talk a little bit about what's happening today with Joe Biden and his Build Back Better. Because I think the whole climate of Trumpism has got to change. Because none of us will survive if he ever gets hold of the controls. All that he's doing wrong doesn't feed us anything positive. And black people should understand that without the progress of Joe Biden, we stand to come out the worst, as always. So let's run this video about Build Back Better. It's number 2. And we got to understand what we have to fight for today.
can I just add something before we cut to the video?
Okay.
Something else just occurred to me, and I should have probably mentioned this first. What I learned and developed and did while I was incarcerated, and I still do this now, right, is that whole narrative, you know, of violence as a measure of respect is false, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I make it my business, especially when I get a chance to talk to someone younger than me who's might be headed in the same direction or has that as like, listen, homie, that's not cool. Number one, and I'll explain why. Because it's number one, you're not only going to hurt someone else, but you're going to hurt yourself and your family.
That's right. Very good comment. I mean, that's the lesson we all have to learn about violence. Anger management. Because as a black person, you're going to get everything thrown at you. If you don't learn, you go off. Because injustice is part of being black.
That day, is the earliest example, one of the earliest examples is John Punch, 1640, right? Him and two of his white colleagues decide they don't want to, what did they call it? They weren't slaves, they were like indentured servants. They decide they just gonna up and quit, and they run away, and they get caught. The other two got slaps on the wrist. They sentenced John Punch to life as a slave.
Yeah.
So this is baked into the system from the giddy up. This has been, you know, this is 1640 we talking about. To this day, the same dynamic is taking place.
Well, we have to relieve ourselves of this poison. Or don't think of it as that poison, just run with it. Do the best you can. We're the spiritual people of the planet. We're the blessed ones. We have to understand that. We have to bring spirituality to ourselves. And don't let anger overcome, because you pay in the long run. All right, just run Build Back Better for us.
Take a look at America today. Over 150,000 Americans are dead from COVID-19. We have a health crisis worsened by Trump's failure to act, an economic crisis deepened by Trump's failure to get the virus under control, a racial justice crisis fanned by Trump's words of hate, a climate crisis exacerbated by Trump's denial of science, and America needs a plan to solve all of them. Over the last century, America has defined itself by rising to meet existential challenges.
This great nation will endure as it has endured.
This country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested.
America is a place where all things are possible.
In order to meet the challenges of today, we can't just build back the way things were before. We have to build back better. We'll make the biggest investment in manufacturing and innovation since World War II, bringing back critical supply chains and ensuring the future is made in America by American workers. Today, federal investment in research and development is at an all-time low. That's why I'm proposing historic research and development investment to sharpen America's competitive edge in new industries. Experts say that this $300 billion investment could help create 3 million good-paying jobs in communities all across America. There's no more consequential challenge we have to meet in the next decade than the onrushing climate crisis. We'll meet this challenge by creating millions of jobs in a clean energy economy, jobs that will ensure American automobile industry leads the world in manufacturing electric vehicles, with 500,000 charging stations all across the country. We'll ensure that America has the cleanest, safest, and fastest rail system in the world. We're going to make investments, so by the end of my first term, we are going to be on an irreversible course to achieve net zero emissions, economy-wide, no later than 2050. In order to build back better, we have to prioritize our caregiving workforce and free up hardworking Americans. My plan will put 3 million Americans to work. We'll work with states to offer every 3- and 4-year-old child in America access to free, high-quality preschool. Right now, low and middle-income families spend as much as 35% of their income on childcare. We'll make it so they won't ever have to spend more than 7% of their income. And we'll give more older Americans and people with disabilities the choice to get care in their home or in the community-based setting, starting with the 800,000 individuals currently on a waiting list to be able to do just that. In order to build back better, we have to ensure that all Americans have opportunities to generate wealth, especially communities of color that have been historically left out of the benefits of an economic recovery. That's why I'm going to take on our successful Obama-Biden Small Business Fund and scale it up to 20 times the size so that black and brown small business owners have access to $150 billion in venture capital and low-interest financing. Times are tough now in America, but we've been here before. We can do this. We can build back better. And I'm looking forward to getting started as soon as we can.
You know, I come up in the 50s, I was gun-ho and joined the Marine Corps at 20, at 18, matter of fact. So at 20, I was in the Marine Corps. I had this, I believe integration would work. I mean, I didn't have too much exposure to it, but I was from New York. And the Marine Corps is full of Southerners. So I got my first exposure to real racism in the Corps. And most of the time I was only black in most scenes. But I always had a faith in, that people would eventually see the light, that there's no difference between black and white. And I mean, this is 1960, when we had Martin preaching to us, we had Malcolm, and we had Muhammad Ali, the pretty boxer. Everybody boxed back in those days. I'm a year older than Muhammad Ali, so I learned how to box because my brother was a boxer. So, I mean, that's the way you defend yourself. And after you knock somebody up, you help them up. We took pride in even defending ourselves. This character that you killed, back in my day, we might have got a gang and beat him up rather than kill him, But I think our standards were our morality, I'm not saying that it's wrong to do, but I think the standards of the president set it our degree of understanding. I'm just talking about the wounds that Trump has left, and we have to concentrate on it more so than anybody else as black people. Because America is not that, we've got a lot to complain about, but we're the only ones that can change things, because we're the ones that have been treated the worst. So that bitterness doesn't need to be there if you're black. You can think of yourself as the king that you are. We're all gods, so we're the spiritual people of the planet. We always come out with God on our side, Like I told you before, I end each show saying, the God in me loves the God in you. Because a lot of people say, I know a lot of people ain't got no God in them, but that's their problem, that they don't have any spiritual energy. And it's in our nature. I'm perfectly convinced that that's what we have in us, that's made us survive all this 400 years that we have to deal with this. And I see a lot of people complaining about Biden. Biden's a product of his exposure. All his life he's been a good guy, be fair, to people. But Trump showed us a different animal, which is a third of this country is like that. Whites in particular, and you got blacks just like that, The way we treat each other is a problem, which we need to convince. But I think this Build Back Better is a chance for us to change everything. If we just support this man and what he's doing. But he's got a good theme. Because if Trump gets anywhere near, that just can't happen. This country is smart enough to get rid of this hustler. But you see how many people voted for him? 74 million. 74 million people. I looked at that, and I said, man, I mean, I was, you know, when I would go back to the 50s, when this was a decent country, man, I was proud to be a Marine. You know, but Vietnam knocked that out the box because you didn't have that same theme because that was crooked. But that was Johnson who got us into that. You know, greed and selfishness, and, you know, that always leads to war or anger. So what I like to concentrate on now is what we can do with this money coming to us. What you can do with what you're doing. What Julian can do with what he's doing. You know, because the enemy is always going to be there. The Trumps are always going to be there. This country is lined up, and people have given up on this country. And that's what we can't do, because we put in too much time and energy and taken too many hits to just give up on this country. So people tell me to go back to Africa. I said, Africa's coming here. We're going back there for. There's more war, and look how we treat each other in Africa. I mean, you go to the Congo, and there's another story. But I just say all this to say that there's a lot of hope coming up. And to you people that don't believe Biden is real, you watch what happens if he gets pulled to the wayside. Yes, Julian, you should be the specialist on this.
So what I like, the type of politics that I like, I don't like the partisan thing, but what I do love is vision-based politics. And I think that the bill has a really good amount of potential for a grander vision for Americans. The ability to invest within electric energy or other renewable energy sources, what that can do for our planet, the potential for, you know, let's say brothers are, you know, have served their amount of time to the state, the country, and they want to find work and they can't find work, there should be no boundary towards them developing their own small businesses and creating companies that can innovate our communities. I mean, just for the country to want to, and I get very passionate about the right types of investments and what it can do to allow people to do better for themselves. And, you know, I just don't like the way people are depicting the bill, because they're depicting it as a handout, but they're not depicting it as a hand up, right? The ability for people to work with electric vehicles, to have a new workforce that can think about how do they work with coding, how to work with EVs. That type of potential can not only make, I don't know, some guy in Minnesota pretty strong, but a brother, sister in the Bronx pretty strong as well.
Hanging out on the corner.
Yeah, I mean, it gives us a new breath for our economy. So I am super excited for the Build Back Better bill. I'll say for me, right, the reason why I went to college was because I went to pre-K. It starts when you're really young.
That's it.
So if we can give every single kid in this country access to a quality preschool education, we'd have a greater workforce. Kids can feel that they have the skills, the ability to challenge the world, to do something really important. You know, so I get really passionate about this stuff because I get so excited.
You talk to any of the guys hanging out on the corner and say, I can't get a job, but they don't make any effort or have any enthusiasm for what they can get. They're afraid of the racism that's out there, especially with Trump in office. Those 4 years, I mean, we went 50, 100 years backwards.
I mean, these guys are so busy, but they're talking about race and if you don't have a solid gender identity, we shouldn't work with you. Let's talk about what we can do to get people working for themselves, heal the planet, have a better metro system. Let's talk about because our country works best when government works with, job developers and works all around, right? I was reading this book, I'm so sorry for talking about it, Makers and Takers. Apple has not had an innovative project since Steve Jobs died. The way Apple is making their money is through like financing deals, like banks.
Right.
They're flipping cash. Our prison system's doing the same thing because everyone's worried about taking so they can make money, but they're not creating something new in the market. It's ridiculous. So I'm sorry, sir. I get so passionate about creating new things.
I was riding with you. I'm thinking that
that's the youth.
No, and right. I feel that energy, and I'm thinking, right, myself. You know, like, okay, you know, I'm Christmas present, past or future, and he's Christmas past, right? And I'm thinking that's the same energy that folks could have, like you said, regular everyday folks, you know, in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
They don't have to necessarily work for somebody else.
Exactly.
Right.
You can create a job. I don't know where I picked this up at. Create a job and give it to yourself.
Yes, sir.
There's something that you can do. And something that you do good. Something that you probably do better than anybody else. You can monetize that.
Each one teach one.
Exactly.
I've got a grandson teaching everybody film.
Wow.
He's got all the guys from the hood they're becoming cameramen and learning how to edit.
Sometimes
he went to school, he went to college for it. Clark Atlanta.
And he's
so
giving
you bring
it back.
it back to your community.
That's right. Someone told me just as I was on my way home, right? Listen, if you ever have a problem with a phone or a computer, any of that stuff, ask the nearest little kid. They'll hook you right up.
Exactly.
And I literally saw this happen.
Right.
With one of my relatives, you know, told me something about Facebook, and I was like, I don't know. She took my phone, gave it to her son. He doop, 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 and gave it back to me. And I was like, wait a minute. Could you undo that and do that again really slow so I could see what you just did? Because I'm new. You know, I'm like Rip Van Homeboy. The world was different when I went away. Now I'm back, and I don't know what is going on with that. But I'm thinking, like, younger folks especially, you know, like their minds are open and not cluttered with all this grown-up stuff, right? And
exactly.
Like you said, they're not afraid to see or to challenge. Like, you cannot tell a little kid no. And when you do, they're thinking, well, that means do it anyway.
That's right. Well,
so take that same energy, create that job, and give it to yourself.
I used to do that with telling me where I can't go. Back in the 50s, that's exactly where I was headed. They told me I couldn't go in to one of these department stores. I get clean and decked out and walk right in. The God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned for more inspiring thoughts. All you have to do is think about it and then do it. God bless you. Peace.
Peace.
We got another minute for the Bronx. Go ahead. How did you enjoy that?
That was great. My first TV experience. I hope I did well. I mean, I wouldn't blow my own horn, but you know, I just try hard. And I got booed off stage when I was a kid at the grade school talent show, and I never wanted to talk to a bunch of people, ever. But when I got this job, I was kind of like behind the scenes, and they gradually started nudging me and pushing me. Hey, go ahead, get up and say something. I was like, nah, because I kept seeing me as that little boy getting shut down by my peers in grade school. And I was like, now, I still see the little kid, but I was like, step aside, little man, I got this.
Well, thank you for coming, and you're going to be back again.
Thank you.
All right? Peace and God be with you.
Awesome.
Power to the people.